Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Today I should be bringing you something a little bit different. What we have here is a synthesizer I've always wanted to mess with, and I finally have the opportunity. What we have is a Crumar Spirit, and this one actually belongs to the Bob Moog Foundation. So I want to give you guys a special shout out to the Bob Moog Foundation for once again giving me the opportunity to work on some of your equipment. It's always a real honor to help you guys out with this stuff. Some of you may be asking though, why would the Bob Moog Foundation be interested in a Crumar Spirit? Well, this is actually a Italian synthesizer that Bob Moog had input on the design. So it's actually a Bob Moog partial design here, which is really cool. And it's a really unique synthesizer. I'll be kind of explaining what this thing offers and how it works. And I'll be going through the circuitry and just showing you the circuit boards, etc. here. Now it is Italian, so you're going to find that it's not quite to the quality of what you find with the Moog synthesizers, but it's still a great synthesizer and it still offers quite a lot. So the first thing is with this synthesizer I have to make a note of is that it's actually a Curtis based instrument, meaning that it has Curtis oscillator chips, Curtis filter chips, Curtis VCAs. The envelope generators, however, are not Curtis. They're actually their own kind of design. But it's just a really unique instrument. It offers a lot. And although it's Curtis chips, it's not like the sequential circuit stuff which used all Curtis chips. It's got a little bit different flavor because of the design approach that was taken with the filter, as well as just the whole architecture of the synthesizer. It's a lot different. So what this synthesizer reminds me of, as far as a Moog-based instrument, is actually reminds me of the Musonics or Moog Sonic 6. Which is actually, it was a Musonics designed first by the Sonic 5, and it was repackaged, and it was to include the transistor ladder filter. But in that particular design, we run into something that this thing has, and that's actually an XY axis modulation source. And it actually goes a step further than what the Sonic 6 gave you, because you have the XY axis modulations, which are two LFOs that run independent from each other. As you can see, these two LEDs flashing. But what's different about it is we got a destination section for each section. So we got the X and Y axis, but we've actually got an X and Y axis modulation wheel. So we can bring them up independently or mix them using the switch here and do some really creative kind of sound architecture with this thing. Something that you don't get out of most synthesizers. So that's one of the big parts of it. There's also some really cool things about the audio bus on this thing. So we have a section here, A and B oscillator, and the noise. This is a basic envelope, audio path, and then we have a shaper Y path. And what that does, it actually will shape the audio path based off the Y axis LFO. We can actually set it to free or keyboard hold or reset, run, and when you bring up these sliders, you'll hear the effect of what you have these set to in your routings through this mixer here. So it's really cool. Just a really neat concept. You don't see this kind of concept very often here. But also, it's just some other things about it. It's just a really clean instrument. First of all, you can see I don't have to do a lot cosmetically to it. I have to do a lot of work electronically to it. It's not very happy. A lot of dirty rotary switches, dirty sliders, some circuitry that just needs some good maintenance, good calibration, etc. So we've got some things to do to it, but we'll let you hear this thing. So we're in the A-B mix here real quick, and I'll show you the two oscillators together. It's a two oscillator synthesizer, I should mention, and here's the two oscillators together. So you can hear the tracking is way out. So that's what we got to address there. But we actually have this week in here. I got to do some work to it. Give you a little flavor of it. I'm going to start first by showing you what's under the hood of this thing. So I've got the screws out of it here. First things that's really nice about it is it's actually got a hinged chassis, so we can actually lift this up on a hinge. It opens up like so. What's really cool to me though is what they use as the interface catches. So to keep this thing from going too far forward when you open it is actually these really cool leather straps. You don't see that in any other synthesizer. We got these leather straps on each side here, and that's what actually keeps this interface from tilting too far forward. Just thought that was a really cool design. It doesn't get much more Italian than that, that's for sure. But we get this thing opened up. As you can see, this is what it looks like on the inside. There's not much to look at. But we have two circuit boards up here making up the interface controls, and the circuitry is actually on the boards there for like envelope generators, you know, VCAs, all that's on these actual circuit boards. You can't see the circuits because it phases the interface. All you're really seeing is the bottom of the circuit boards. Here in the middle we have another little board. This actually is what holds the VCOs. So this is actually the two voltage controlled oscillators made up of Curtis chips. So for those that aren't familiar, when they hear me use the term Curtis chips, this is what I'm talking about. These chips right here. You can see it says CEM3340. That's an oscillator chip. And as you can see, there's a lot less circuitry. It doesn't take very much circuitry to make that oscillator work. The chip actually contains all the stuff needed to make the oscillator work, such as the exponential current conversion circuitry, the thermal compensation circuitry, the wave shape circuitry is inside there. So really everything around it's just supportive. It's that's how it actually, you know, gets its capacitive sets to make you know, certain things work in a certain way, such as pulse widths, summing nodes for making the CV work, your calibration points, etc. here. So that's really all that's required for the Curtis chip. So when you look at this compared to like a Mini Moog, this is two oscillators. If you look at something like a Mini Moog oscillator board, way more complex. So that kind of shows you just how much room the Curtis chips save. One reason they used them in the Memory Moog, for that exact reason. They could fit a lot more. They could actually fit 18 oscillators within a board and not take up the whole synthesizer chassis. So that's why they use these. So we got our oscillators. Over here is actually where I had to start. This is actually the rectifier and the transformer, rectifier, and filter board here. And so what it does, basically takes the AC input in, goes to a transformer, converts the 120 volts down to 20 volts, and then it goes to the rectifier circuitry, and then out to these filter caps as unregulated DC voltage is what that does for us. And that comes out over here and goes to this board, which has our regulators on it, and then it's actually regulated plus negative 12 volts. But when I got this one in, it wouldn't power up. And what had happened was, it's a design flaw with this particular synthesizer design, was that they have a iron core transformer here, and it's only held in place by the solder lugs on the board. And so this is a pretty heavy transformer, and what happened was, since this had no straps on it, just the initial shock of mechanical shock when you ship these things, or if you was to move it around kind of hard, it actually pulled the legs out of the transformer and broke the legs off the windings. Now luckily it didn't damage the windings. I was able to actually trace back, get the windings back, resolder them to the legs, epoxied the legs back into the transformer, and then I actually made these straps to hold the transformer in place, so that will never happen again. So that was where I kind of started with my repairs on this one. And but yeah, that's just to look at the inside. The chassis material is actually a particle board, kind of like what you find like the Trident, the Korg Tridents, the Poly 6s, etc., with some nice end panels here. But this chassis is in really good shape. I don't see any water damage or swelling or any of that kind of stuff from moisture. So it looks really good. So when we go to the front of the unit, we got this keyboard assembly. And as you can see, it's on this little plastic hinged device here. And what we've actually got, we got a FITAR keyboard and our left-hand control, which has our pitch wheel, our X-axis, Y-axis modulation, our glide on and off and auto, as well as the glide rate. But when we open this board up, we actually get a little bit more circuitry. So as you can see, this lifts up, it hinges up. Now what we've got down here is actually the digital circuitry for the keyboard. This is a digital keyboard. And so it has a diode matrix set up with a DAC, so digital to analog converter. And so it actually generates analog voltages, which is used by the oscillators, etc. But they start as a digital reference. So that's what this board's job is to generate the conversion from digital to analog. But you can also see your contacts, how they work here. So you can kind of see that they're kind of like a Mini Moog in the fact that they're using a spring. Let me see if I can get a better angle here to show you this. So you can see there how I'm tilting it, you can see that spring touch that bus bar, which runs across there. That's how that works. And then there's a diode that's related to it. This diode right here. That's part of the diode matrix. And so that's how that all works. But if we look at the end panel here, you like to see it says FITAR on it. Right there. So it's a FITAR keyboard. And once again, it's Italian, so things aren't quite built to like Moog spec, what you typically see, but it's still a great synth. But you can see like all this is plastic. I got to fix all this where it's just came loose. It was originally just like a sticker that stuck between these two pieces of plastic to keep that from doing that. So I got some fixing to do there. But that's a good look at the inside of it, and I just thought you might appreciate seeing that. One other little note I should make while I'm inside here, showing you the insides, is actually these harnesses were pre-built, and you can see that this one still has the stickers on it. So I believe it has initials, but it says 683. And I believe that is like, I don't know if that's LL or what, but then we got this other sticker that has model, which has Spirit written on it with a C. So that's got a C on it. We'll look at that a little closer. I'll take this bracket off. We'll look at that a little closer here later on. But yeah, 683 is, so that'd be June of 83, I'm guessing. So when that was actually assembled. So I'm guessing what they do, they have these harnesses pre-assembled. And then once they had the chassis ready to put the harness in, they'd pull this harness off off a line that was already pre-wired. Put in here, wire everything up, plug out, make all the connections. And that's how they did it. So that's just kind of a look at it. But I thought that would be a cool thing to show real quick, is just those stickers right there. Alright, so here's the left board of this instrument. This is actually your audio mixers that you saw me working with earlier. This is your filter section. You can see the Curtis filters here, the 3350 chips. There they are, associated with everything. But what I'm doing right now, I'm just taking a good evaluation of the board. Get an idea of what all we have here, and also just kind of experimenting with ways to approach the switches, the rotary switches that we have so many issues with. And as you can see, I've desoldered one of them already. I have it laid out over here, and I did find out you can open these up. So if you have this problem, you can actually service these rotary switches. So what I'm going to be doing is cleaning these contact plates. As you can see, that's actually what mates into the board. And as you rotate the switch, these contacts will hit different points of those contacts, making circuitry connect. That's how that works. So here's the upper half. You can kind of see. Now you got to be gentle with these things. If you do this, make sure you know your orientation of these pins, because these actually are loose. They fall off, as you can see. So you got to know where they go, the direction, in order to put these back together correctly. So that's something you want to make a note of if you try to service one of these yourself. So what I'm going to be doing is just cleaning up these as well, tightening up the pins, making sure these mate really good against the surface of the contacts. And that's how it kind of works. But you can kind of see how it works. So they're not glued or anything together. They're just kind of compressed together. They got a notch right here, which you can see aligns with a notch in the top half of this rotary switch. And that's how that works. These knobs actually come off if you need to take the knob off for any reason. They actually have a set screw in them with a little flat blade screw. And so that's how that works. But anyways, just thought you guys might enjoy seeing that. I'll be actually recapping this section. This is the power supply section here. This is the plus negative 12 volts. Filter capacitors will be getting changed out. You can also see our Curtis VCAs, our 3360s. So here's one of our 3360s associated with the shaper amplitude modulation, as well as our main VCA right here. Sorry for that noise, I bumped my table here. But we've got this VCA here, the 3360, which is associated with your primary VCA. So that's how it looks, but you can just see it's a real clean board. It's in really good shape. No corrosion that I can see anywhere. Just, needs a good cleaning. Sliders are going to be flushed and lubed. And we're going to just address this thing and get it where it's going to be reliable. Alright, so now looking at the top right board, just going to give you guys a walkthrough of this board in particular as well. And what we have in this board is the two envelope generators, one for loudness, one for the filter. We got the two LFOs for the Y and X axis. And then we got the gate routing for the actual keyboard gate circuit to actually trigger the envelopes. So we can either do the keyboard using this switch, we can use the Y-axis LFO to trigger the envelopes, or the X-axis to trigger the envelopes, based on which these switches are selected. Or you can have them all selected, now each change, they'll each trigger the envelopes off whatever rate and keyboard put in, input or whatever. But it is logic. It's using Boolean logic. It's using OR gates to make this up. And so that's actually what's on this board, as well as all these ICs you see is actually logic chips like 4075, etc. The envelopes are actually using a little bit different design as well. They're using a 556 timer chip, a dual timer chip like what you find in like the Multi-Moog, Micro-Moog, Prodigy. But once again, we see a whole different chipset design. They're using 4066s, 1458s, which is not uncommon, TL072s. But it's a little bit different configuration just because the chipset that they're using. It's not quite the typical Moog. The LFOs are also a bit unique. Once again, we see that they're using Curtis chips to make up part of the LFO circuitry. So we got a 3360 there. And what they're actually doing in this particular design is the LFOs are very similar to other Moog synthesizers, but in Moog's case they typically use like a 3080 OTA op amp to make up part of the control of the oscillator circuitry. In this case they're taking advantage of a 3360 and they're sharing each of the dual VCAs to make up the OTA circuitry for the LFOs. So I just thought that was a kind of a cool approach there. Once again, we see them incorporating Curtis chip. So that's pretty much what's on this board. It's a pretty basic board, but once again, it's all the circuitry you need to make this thing work like it needs to work here. Alright, so I've decided to go a little bit more in detail on the actual rotary switch used in the Spirit. I've had some issues with some of these that are kind of stiff. I can't hardly turn them. They're really, really, really tight. And after some investigation, I found out how you can fix that if you have a Spirit that has this problem. So I'm just going to go through the basics of how you open these things up. I already showed you the contacts when I was going through the actual left board, but I'm going to walk you through this thing. So, like I say, what you want to do is first just take I'm using a little flat blade screwdriver, and there's a little notch right here, that little indentation there. I'm actually using that to kind of wedge the screwdriver in. And once you get, I'm just going to use my little smaller screwdriver. So once you get in there, you can just kind of pry it just a little bit. Don't pry it all the way though. You want to make sure you hold this thing. See, now you can see I got that lip opened up. So now I'm going to take my larger screwdriver and go in here and just gently pry this thing open. I'm going to make sure I keep this thing faced upward so I can pull our contacts off. There's our contact base, and I've got our contacts here so they don't just fall off. And then I'm going to take a marker. This is how I'm doing these because I'm not familiar with the Spirit that much. I'm taking a marker and I'm just marking below the actual contact points, and I'm also putting just a little round circle on the other side. I'll show you here in a minute a little bit more detail here so you can see this. So you can kind of see how I've done it. I've got, maybe you can see this, maybe my camera will focus. So you can see I put just a little black dot on here, and then the actual actuator plate. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pull my contact off, and because they just sit in here, so you literally just take them. That's why you want to mark them so you don't lose the position of those things. So then what I'm also going to do now, since I got those off, this is actually where it's stiff. I can't hardly move it. It's not actually the contacts or the contact plate. It's actually in the actual actuator here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another mark, and I'm going to take that gap that we have right here, that little indentation, and I'm going to put just a nice little mark across my plate, as you can see there, to identify that mark to where the plate sits. That way when I take this apart, we don't lose our position of this actual plate. Then what we're going to do, because the problem is up here in the actual rotary part of it, the actual detents, we're going to take the knob off. The knob comes off with a little flat blade screwdriver like so. Now you want to kind of support your base when you take this knob off. We're going to pull that knob off. We're going to pull this off. Now what happens is we can actually push our actuator out the back. Now you got to be very careful. I've already went and chased ball bearings because you can see there's a little ball bearing that sits in here on the top, and there's one also underneath the bottom side. So there's two in this thing. But I slide that out just like so, and this actuator comes apart like that. Now you can actually see where those little ball bearings right in those grooves to give you your detents. If I get that to focus, maybe it'll focus. See if it will. There it is. Yeah, you can kind of see those little, looks like a gear in there. That's where these little ball bearings ride against. It has a spring in here, which I'll show you. I'm going to knock that ball bearing out. As you can see, it's rolling away. Make sure we catch that. Don't want to lose that. And then behind that, there's a spring with the other ball bearing there. And there's our spring. So that's what makes up the actual rotary switch right there. So what I'm going to do, is this is what I've been doing to them, I find works really well, is I use some synthetic, just some super lube is what it's called. You can get this at Harbor Freight or wherever. And it's just a really good synthetic grease. So what I do, I just take a little bit on my finger, like so. Can I see like that? I'm just going to put a little bit on that track. And then I'm going to take my other screwdriver again. I'm just going to kind of work that little bit around in there, so we get them in those little grooves. I'm letting a little bit get on the upper half of the actual rotary switch where the plate sets and kind of rides. That way it has lubrication on it as well, because it's just plastic. It's just plastic against plastic. So this one I'm finding works really, really well. And this is the way you can restore your rotary switches in this case. Now, not all Moogs use this style switch. That's why I'm doing this real delicately, because I'm not familiar with the Crumar Spirit. But this is a very similar rotary switch to what you find in the actual sequential circuits, like the Pro 1. It's a very similar rotary switch. So I'm just kind of working some of that grease around there like so. I'm going to have a little excess, and then I'm going to take the little excess out. And then what I'm actually going to do there is I'm going to put a little bit of this on the shaft where it goes through the actual rotary switch housing. This will give us lubrication around that shaft there. What I like about the synthetic grease too is it doesn't react with plastic, so it's almost like a silicone. And then what I'm going to do is very delicately put our ball bearings back in here. And I also put just a little bit of grease on them as well. So I'm going to hold that one in with this finger while I put the spring back through this hole. I don't know how this is coming through on that camera. It's hard to do this and look at that camera. And so then we'll put that ball bearing back over here. So the grease also kind of helps hold in the ball bearings while you work. So I've got those just kind of set in there. You got to be very delicate. Then what you want to do is find your mark on the top half where you can see I got that little mark right there. We're going to actually line that up with our indentation on our case. So you get something like this right here. So it'll drop back in there. And there we go. And now, I feel this thing. It's hard to do this without the knob on it, but there it is. Smooth, as you can see. So it works very, very well there. So we got that taken care of. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean my hands up a little bit, get this grease off my hands. I'm actually going to put the knob back on, and just that'll hold our upper section together. Now these have a screw. You can kind of see that indentation that's left. If I can focus in here, you can kind of see that indentation that's left from the set screw. So I'm just going to line that back up with our set screw the best I can. Not real worried about accuracy. I'm just going to snug this knob up. We're not actually going to like tighten it down. But that way at least now this is all held together. I don't have to worry about this coming back apart and losing my ball bearings right in there. But yeah, you can see how much better that feels. Way better. So now we'll focus on the low half. I'm actually going to clean these contacts up really good, and then I'll go from there. What I'm actually using for this is this section what I use for a lot of things. It's a mag polish, and I'll just use some mag polish on it. Use a Q-tip here. I'm also finding that these have a lot of oxidation in them, so I don't know if it's just because of the plating or what, but you can kind of see this is not too bad. It actually looks pretty good when you look at it. So I'm going to take my polish here. I'm just going to massage it in. It should look even better when I'm done with this. I'll give you an example of just one section after I polish it. Doesn't take very much force, just a nice light polish here. Then when I wipe that down, you'll see how much better this is going to look. This is with like just a very light stroke. Maybe you can see that. My camera is not wanting to focus. Oh, let me see if I can focus this in here a little bit. There we go. So you can kind of see that shiny one versus the dull looking one, and that's what I'm doing. I'm just gently polishing these things up so they get a good contact between the plates and the actual contacts that we're going to be putting back in there, and that's how this works. So I'm going to finish polishing this one up, put it back together, and it should be good. But hopefully this helps some of you guys out too that have a Crumar Spirit with really stiff knobs, because that's why I ran into this one. I thought it was originally a contact problem, like a stuck contact. Maybe it's pushing too hard against these, and that's not the case. Alright, now I have everything kind of cleaned up here. As you can see, I've polished my contacts real good. They look nice and shiny there. So we're going to have a good mating surface. I'm going to just show you the bottom end reassembly of this rotary switch right quick. So as you can see by the markings I've made here with a marker, I've got the flat line and the dot. Same thing over here on, if I can get my orientation right with my camera, here we go. So same thing here, flat line and a dot down here. That's going to show me how I put in my contacts. So flat line will be representation of the area where the contacts come down off the contact. So we go here and I'll show you. So go here. So there's an example of one of them. You can see I've got that line there. And once again you can see, let me wipe off my screwdriver here. So you can see this line here. It's going to be the orientation of basically where this contact goes in. So we'll go here and put that one right there like that. And so that's how it looks. So you look at those two together, you can see my marks. And then what you'll do is you'll just kind of hold that in position. I'm going to take the rotary switch and I'll press it back together like so, and you can see it'll just snap back together. That's how that works. And if I do that, so I can do this. I usually do this. There we go. Snaps together, and then it's back together. And that's what you do, and that's how you clean these things up. And now we got a good clean rotary switch. Alright, we now have this thing all complete, and it's working fantastic here. All the rotary switches move nice and neat and clean, no seized knobs or anything like we had earlier. And I also replaced all the common failure trend components I find in other synthesizers, such as the 4000 series CMOS chips. So when I put all new chips that were available, there's some in here that are not available anymore. But replace those. Recapped it with electrolytics as well as some of the tantalum capacitors that was in here. Had one bad rotary pot. This one right here in particular, that's associated with the actual filter contour mount. This one actually had a cracked carbon track. As you can see, it's got a long shaft, and this is one design I run into with some synthesizers when they have a long shaft, especially like the Oberheim stuff. because you have a lot of leverage on this top half of the shaft, and it can actually damage, if it gets bumped really hard, it can damage the carbon track, and that's exactly what happened in this one. So the carbon track's no good. So I went through my stash of parts, because you can't just go out and buy this anymore. And I found a part that was very close, not quite exactly, but I was able to actually modify the potentiometer to fit in here, and got it working like it needs to work, which you'll see when I get in the demos of this thing. So it really just did a good maintenance on it. Electronically took care of course, mostly all those rotary switches. That's where I spent a lot of my time, cleaning and polishing all those contacts and getting it cleaned up. Calibrated the oscillators, got the oscillators all calibrated, and it just sounds really good. But I'll walk you around back real quick, because I hadn't showed you the back of this thing yet. So we'll go around back here, and I'll show you what's offered on the back panel. So first we'll start over here at the left. We got the power switch, of course the power input for your power cord, IAC jack, 750 milliamp fuse with a fuse holder there. Then we got our tag here. Now this is model SRT, and the serial number is actually N2 00065. So this may be the 65th one built. I'm not real familiar with their serial number codes here. But the wattage is 13, 50, 60 hertz, and made in Italy. So it's a really cool tag there. Of course, it's got a really beautiful Crumar logo across the back here. Now evidently some of these had MIDI. This one here was plugged, or was plugged from factory, I guess. It was maybe an option to have MIDI. Then we've got all these wonderful jacks here. So we've got external gate in, so we can actually send a gate into this thing to trigger the envelopes. External pitch in, so we can plug external keyboard into this thing that's analog and send CV voltages to the oscillators, etc. Keyboard pitch output, that's where we can send the, of course, the pitch out from the keyboard, the Crumar, and gate output, so you can send the gates out of the Crumar to an external envelope generator, etc. Then we got the oscillator B pedal. This is where you can actually send CV into oscillator B only and do pitch shifts with CV voltage. Filter pedal, the same thing, you can control the cutoff. Shaped audio output, and then we also have this one I'm using, which is ADSR/mix audio output. Now, what these do is actually pretty cool. So back to our mixer section up here, we've got two sections. We got this section here, which is called the shaper patch, or shaper Y path, I mean. And what it does, it actually has a VCA built in, and anytime you turn up any of these sliders, it's going to pulse. It's going to control the amplitude of that volume of that signal, so to speak, from the rate of the Y. When you get into this little mixer here, it's just your typical audio path, like most synthesizers are. You turn these up just to turn up your oscillators in an audio mix, and then when you trigger a note, you turn on the VCA and you hear it. This is a little bit different. So what it does is it gives you the shaped out audio output, which is this mixer, and then you have your ADSR mix, which is this one here, plus that one. So you can do some really cool stuff. This would be really handy in a stereo field situation. We want to pan one of the mixers a little bit to the right, one to the left, get a stereo field going on. That's what that would really be handy for there. Then we also have this external audio input. So that's where we can actually process external audio into the filter of the Crumar, etc. But anyways, you can just see how clean it looks across the back here. I do have two screws I've got to put in. It was missing these on arrival. There's a screw that goes there, and then one that goes there. So I still got some screws I got to get for it. But as you can see, just looking at the side here, the wood, how nice this thing looks all the way across. There's still a sticker right there I got to either remove, or I got to take that off still. But you can just kind of see how great this thing looks across there. Really clean instrument, really beautiful design. Really, it's a really neat instrument. But anyways, let me put the camera on the tripod here, and I'll give you guys a sound demo. Alright, so I'm first going to start here just kind of going over the demo of this thing for you guys. I'll start my typical ways, which go into the oscillators, the filter, the envelope generators, etc. here. And just give you a good overview of what the Spirit sounds like. I know I've talked a lot about the circuitry. You've seen some of the circuitry, but now we actually get to hear this thing. So first of all, I'm just going to show you how it sounds raw. We got both oscillators on, the filter open, wide open. And so this will just be the audio path between the Curtis 3340 oscillators mixed and the output in our little mixer section over here. So here we go. I'll go down and scale the keyboard. So you can hear it sounds really good. It's got a really good sound. The oscillators are in tune really well. If we go over here to the master section, we got an octave, so we can actually shift the octave of both oscillators at the same time using this knob here. Which now you can hear how clean these rotary switches are. They're going to have a little break between them because they are a break between the steps, so you hear that little break, but you can hear how great they are in the actual footages. So that's our octave. Then we'll go to oscillator B here, and we got an octave range for it as well. We're in unison right now. We can go -1. Brings the oscillator down an extra octave. And I'll go to the scale of the keyboard in -1. So there it is in -1. We got unison again. Then we'll go +1. So we got unison here. Then here's +1. As you can hear, then we got +2. You can hear. So that's the octave range. Then we got bass, which is actually a drone frequency. We got wide frequency, which turns this interval control into a wide frequency, kind of like a micro Moog has. So you can go here and go. That's it in bass frequency. These are kind of the droning kind of stuff. Then we'll go back to unison. We'll retune this up with our interval control. And then we're kind of back to normal. So now, since I showed you the oscillators kind of combined here, I'll turn on oscillator B. Now here's just A only. And what you got with it, you got waveform. So we'll start with the triangular waveform. We got 50% duty cycle square wave. We got 30% duty cycle, 15, and 6. You hear the different pulse widths. And then we got, of course, the sawtooth, which you've already heard. And that's our waveforms. Once again, you can hear how great these rotary switches are working since I've cleaned them here. You've also got oscillator sync. I'll come back to that here in a minute. But that's oscillator A. Here's oscillator B. So you got, on this is a little bit different. We'll start with the triangular wave. You got a 40% duty cycle. Not quite a square. We got 20% duty cycle. 10%. And then we got 3%. Which is really narrow. And then of course then we got the sawtooth. And that's the two oscillators, or oscillator B now. We got the interval control, which you've already heard. I will sweep through it just so you can hear how accurate and clean this rotary switch, or this rotary pot is here. And then there's our oscillators. So we also got oscillator sync. So if we go to square wave on both of these, or 40% duty cycle in the square wave, but 50% duty cycle on the other oscillator, turn on oscillator sync. We'll bring that down. I think it's... We'll come back to that a little later too, because it gets a little bit more interesting when we start talking about the modulation section. Kind of gives you an idea of how it works though. So we'll go back to unison here. So we are back in unison there. But that's the oscillators. Now the filter on this one's a little bit different. And I say that because it doesn't really self-oscillate like the typical Moog filter. But it uses the Curtis 3350 filter chips here. And I'll just kind of show you how it works. So right now we're in a single filter mode. So we got master cutoff and master resonance, which sounds something like this. But if I turn the oscillators off, you'll hear that I'm all the way intent on resonance. And we don't really have that self-oscillation like you typically hear from some of the other filters. It doesn't really get excited until you put a frequency into it for it to resonate off of. So that's how that works. But we've also got different, two different filters. And so you got overdrive. And now with this other lower cutoff works. Now this lower cutoff knob reminds me a lot of the Voyager, the Mini Moog Voyager, in the sense that this would be like your spacing knob for your secondary filter. In this case, it actually, you engage the secondary filter. I do wish that was a feature on the Voyager though, because that two filters kind of sometimes takes away the content, the harmonic content. But on this one you can turn it off, so it makes it kind of nice. But we got basically the overdrive, so it's going to be really overdriven. So you got your master, and then your cutoff of your secondary filter. We'll put some key tracking on there. We can also engage a little envelope generator. It almost sounds like oscillator sync because it's so overdriven that it loses artifacts. So anyways, that's the overdrive. Then we got band pass. So once again, you got your master, and you got your secondary filter. And you can actually hear the two filters, how they're separate from each other. But they share the resonance control. You can actually flip the switch right here called low and variable for the resonance, and it'll actually fix one of the filters so the resonant only controls the other filter. So you can hear one filter staying at a fixed resonance versus this. So pretty cool design feature there. It's something a little bit unique for a filter design. Then we got high pass. So here's high pass filter. Turn it down just a hair. Go to a square wave here. You can also turn key tracking off on one of the filters using this switch here, the format or dynamic, and it'll allow only one filter to track the keyboard. And that one filter, if we turn that back here, you have that works. Yeah, both filters go down the scale of the keyboard. So like I say, this filter is a really unique design. We'll get more in detail some of the harmonics of it as I play with this thing. You also have a 24 decibel or 12 decibel selection. There's in 12 decibel. Here's 24. Here, a little bit more of that resonance come out in the 24 decibel mode. So that's the filter. I will go over too real quick the envelope generator for the filter. So this was one area I had to fix because this actual potentiometer right here was busted and I didn't have anything, I couldn't find one like it. It has what they call a center tap style potentiometer where the center, when you set the pot actually in the center, that's actually a spot where it's balanced. Kind of like an audio pot in some cases. And those are really hard to find in some of the values and shapes and sizes. So I went through my stash of old parts and I found a potentiometer that had the correct specs. It wasn't a center tap, so I actually customized the pot to give it a center tap balance. And so now we have both positive as well as negative. You hear 0 is the center. And they can hit inverted. So there's that. So that's your invert and non-invert amount of contour. This would be like the knob on the Mimo called amount of contour. Then we got the envelope generator. It's an ADSR envelope. It's a little bit different as far as how it works. It doesn't work like the typical envelope generator that we're used to. But we got a tach. So there's our tach. We got decay, which decay, it kind of has a point where it just enters. So now I'll kind of show you how that sounds. It's not a bad slider pot either. It's just the way it kind of reacts. So right now we're set to 0. It's just going to be a click. You hear it right there. We have a point. It's a nice percussive, and then we go just a little, just a touch, a little bit more. And then we have more of a decay. So that's our decay, and then we've got the sustain. So we can set our decay all the way back to 0, bring up our sustain. You hear it doesn't drop all the way to 0. Then put a little decay back on there. You hear it drop all the way to 0 when I got sustain set to 0. If we bring that up a little bit, here it stops at a point. Because we can set it above our decay level. So there's that. Then we've got our release. I'm going to set the release up for our loudness envelope here. But we've got a release. So right now we can let it off. You can hear it's the filter is going to immediately release when I let off the key. So anyways, you can see how that works. So there's our filter envelope generator. Turn it down a little bit. There we go. So now what I'll do, I'll actually show you the loudness here. So we'll open this filter back up, so it's just the oscillators. I set oscillator 2 down to -1. That's what you heard me change during that. Just give a little bit more harmonic content there. So now we got the filter opened up. We'll set everything to 0 here in our loudness. Just a click. We'll bring up the attack. And same thing here. You can see it's got a point where it just kind of comes in. So that's our attack. We got decay. Same thing here. It has a point where it just So there's our decay. Then we got our sustain, which once again that's how low the decay goes. You get this really nice percussive thing, just like on a mini Moog. Anyway, you can kind of hear it sounds. It gets that really percussive kind of stuff. Of course, you can go to multi-trigger. I will show you this real quick because we got trigger options, single or multi-triggering. So now you can see if I hold in the key, we'll go back here and you hear it die out. I can re-trigger the envelope. If I go to single, you see it doesn't recycle the envelope. So there's that. We got the release as well, which you've already kind of heard. I'll put a little bit of decay on it first. So we got the decay. Now, you can see I let off a key and it goes immediately away. I'll bring up the release. And you can hear it follows out the release time. If I hold in the key, it's going to follow out the decay. And so there's our envelope generators. We also got a VCA bypass, just like kind of what you found in a multi-Moog or micro-Moog. Just make it sit there and sustain. Basically, it turns on the VCA, and that's what you get. So that's the envelope generators, pretty much the basics of the synthesizer section. We got some other features here such as gate selections, which is really cool. So we can actually, right now we got keyboard gate selection on, so if we trigger the keyboard, it'll trigger the envelopes off the keyboard. Like so. So I'll go here and kind of make a little bit quicker there. So we got the keyboard, or we can make the x-axis modulation trigger the envelopes. Or we can make the Y shaper. And it's based off the rate of the LFO. So that's what this gate selection up here does. So that's pretty much the basis of the synthesizer. Now we're going to get a little bit more interesting because we've got features that make this thing a lot different. One of the features being, of course, the x-y-axis modulation and this other audio bus. So we've got a noise source also. I'll bring that up real quick. It's got one of those same noise chips that you find in like the Memory Moog and some of the other Moog models, which has kind of a loop. We'll you hear the noise there. There's a noise. We've also got this other shaper Y path mixture, which what it does, it has its own VCA for these outputs, and it turns on and off the VCA with the strobe of the Y shaper modulation. So if we bring up the A axis, for example, or the A oscillator, you hear it's just automatically just kind of being fed. We got the B, which has the same thing, but we've got a ring modulator, and this is where it gets kind of cool. We got a brightness control. I'll get more on that later, but you can hear it's all connected to the rate of the shaper. We got noise, which is also what makes it cool though is you can combine these. So we can take the A oscillator in that, put the B oscillator in this one, and so what you'll hear is the B oscillator die out with envelope while A sits there in cycles. So we can do something like this. We'll make a slow attack on our loudness envelope. Or we can do right the opposite, have the B throbbing. So anyways, yeah, how cool that is. I combined the ring modulator earlier, as you heard too, so you get a lot of like different variations from the synthesizer, not typically found in most other synthesizers. So there's that. Now we'll go back to our regular audio path here. Oh, we'll show you the brightness real quick, because I didn't really show you that real well. We'll go up just to oscillator A only. Here's just a brightness controls. All it is just a filter on the output of the VCA that they're throbbing here with the shaper Y. But that's the brightness control. Now we'll go back to our regular audio path here and mix both oscillators back together here. So now we're back to normal, but now we're going to get into the XY axis modulation. This is where this thing gets really, really cool. And we'll start with the Mod X section first. I'll show you some features that we have in the actual sections over here, such as it has an arpeggiator. Since this is using a digital keyboard, it actually takes a, uses the LFO as a clock source for this arpeggiator mode. So we got ripple effect. We've got our arpeggiator. So they go really quick too, as you can see. So we got our arpeggiator, we got leap. And that's what one of those arpeggiators that sound really good with just a little bit of effect on. I'll put just a little effect on our mix. You can hear it. That arpeggiator is really cool. It's a really nice feature there. And of course, once you go back to off, it's going to be a normal tone there. So that's the arpeggiator section. You got a modulation source. We'll come back to that. You've already seen kind of the rate here. You got a rate control basically with this little light that shows you your rate you're running the LFO at. So now we'll actually go over here to the left-hand control, because that's where this thing really comes alive. So we've got the Mod X modulation wheel and the Shaper Y modulation wheel. So we'll start just with the Mod X section. We got it up here where we can assign it. This is where it gets kind of cool. So we got, we'll bring up the wheel. So right now we're in off. I'll go to oscillator A and B, which is both oscillators being modulated. We can go to oscillator A only. So here's just modulating oscillator A only. You can start oscillator B, but it's not, it's just setting at a fixed frequency of the keyboard. And once again, these are a lot of the sounds that would sound really good with effects. I'm going to put just a little bit of effects on this one again with that little bit of modulation on oscillator A. Slower attack. So as you can hear, it sounds really cool just with that one. So we got oscillator A, or we can do oscillator pulse width modulation of A. So we'll go back to a 50% duty square wave here. Well, still modulation right now of the frequency. So we'll just bring up just oscillator A only right now. So now we'll go to oscillator A with modulation. And so now we're actually adding pulse width modulation. I'm changing our percentages of our duty cycle up here. But you can hear how it changes the... So you can hear it. So you can modulate that. You can also modulate the filter, upper and lower, which that's what they're calling the two filters. So if we go to bandpass here, we'll actually modulate both filters. So they are both being modulated. We can go to just filter upper. So you hear it modulating just that one filter, the upper modulation. So that's the controls you have. I will go back to oscillator A and B modulation here for this, and I'll show you the different waveforms we have for our modulation. So we bring up this wheel. Actually, open this filter back up here. So now once again, we're modulation A and B, or modulating A and B, I'm sorry. We got square wave. So we got square wave modulation, then we got random sample and hold. Then what we have is we actually have Y sample and hold. So now this goes back, if you guys have watched my synthesizer.com video on the actual sample and hold module, this kind of works that way because the Y is actually going to sample off the wave shape of the Y modulation source. So right now we can set our rate of our Y axis, and you'll hear a different we can change the waveform of our Y. As far as Moog products go, though, you can think of the Moog, I think it's the 1120 sample and hold module that you'd plug into like your mini Moog or modular. Kind of similar stuff going on right here with this. So what it's actually doing, it's a sample and hold circuit sampling the waveform of the Y. That's what it's doing. So you've got that mode. Then you've got red noise. And then we got oscillator B modulation. So what we'll do, we'll actually go to A only modulation. We're going to assign that to the filter, which is also really cool. And now we get to FM synthesis stuff like I've demoed in mini Moogs many a times. So this is an example of FM modulation using this oscillator B inject into the filter, and that's how we get those kind of modulations. Just like what we do on the mini Moog. When I bring up, you leave the oscillator 3 in a audio frequency range, and then I'll bring up the modulation wheel with it assigned to filter, and you get a very similar approach here. So there's the x-axis. Then we've got the y shaper here. So now the Y shaper is a little bit different. It's an LFO, but it also works as an envelope generator in some aspects. Now it doesn't have the ADSR kind of stuff like what you find typically, but it'll follow out a pattern of the actual envelope that's built into it. So we'll go here. So it's going to bring up this wheel here, bring up both oscillators. So right now it's in the off position here. We can go to AB oscillator. We do have waveforms. So we got like a reverse sawtooth, a triangular, and then a sawtooth. So that's in free mode. So right now it's actually it's in a free running oscillator LFO mode. We can go to keyboard hold. You can hear that waveform inside that, but it's going to hold it as long as I hold in the key. Like so. Let me actually mute my phone real quick. Take just a second here. There we go. So we got keyboard hold, which you're hearing there. We got reset. If we can set the rate by, or we can set the speed of it by the rate knob. So that's reset. So you can see as long as I hold on a key, it's going to fall out that. And now Ryan seems to work exactly the same way as what I've. it doesn't really change much. And I've watched videos on that to make sure I wasn't missing something, but the reset and run seem to do pretty much the same thing. As you can see, they both do exactly the same thing. I don't know why, but that's what I've even seen in the video demos I've watched to see if I was missing something when I was looking at the schematics. And so that's pretty much how it works. But what's really nice is that particular feature, if you assign it just to oscillator B, so you get something like that. Once again, you can control the amount of that by your shaper Y wheel. So you get like a detuning effect. So really handy kind of feature there. But what I like about it too is when you go back to free, it's a self-oscillate, a self-running LFO, we can do some really fun modulation stuff when we go using both the X and Y axis. So we'll assign X axis to the A oscillator, the Y shaper to the B oscillator, and we can get some very complex modulations, kind of like what you found with Vox Humana, etc., things like on the Poly Moog. So now we're working just with X-axis. So here we can get some really complex kind of double modulations between the two oscillators by using these right here. So we'll go back to the shaper Y. I hadn't showed you all the features yet. So we got oscillator B pulse width modulation. So this will be B only. So we'll set it over here to 40% to bring up the wheel. So there's that, and once again we can change it to an envelope. So you get something like that right there with it. Go back to free run. So there's the oscillator pulse width. We got the LFO rate. of, actually that affects the alpha rate of x-axis, so so you can bring up this wheel and it'll start affecting the speed of kind of a cool feature. Of course, you can use the envelope for that. Once again, we can make that real slow. So you get something like that right there with it. So pretty cool feature. That's it's a very unique modulation source, as you can see. Then we got, of course, we got the filter low. So we have the upper on the x-axis. The y has the lower control of the filter. So I actually set this filter back to a bandpass here. Both oscillators on. Bring up the wheel. There it is. And once again, we can assign the x-axis to the upper filter, and you get something like this. See what you can hear? It gets really creative. You can do so much with this thing just from the modulation sections alone and the double filters. That double filter feature is just something very, very unique, and I really like it for that reason. But anyways, we also have glide. Almost forgot to go over glide here. So we'll go back to just a normal sound here. So we got glide modes. So right now we're off. We got auto glide, which means it's kind of like a digital glide. So if you, so as long as you hold a note and change notes, it will glide to the next note. If you let off a key, go up in frequency a little bit. So if you reset the keyboard between notes, it'll actually not carry the glide over. If I hold in this low key, as you can Let's see, so that's the auto mode of the glide. Then we got on, which is your typical. So that's your glide, and then we also got the pitch bend. And I did clean all these pots really good right here for the pitch and the modulations. They were very erratic when this thing came in, along with all the rotary switches. What is neat though, they use Allen Bradley potentiometers, just like what you found in the Mini Moog for the X and Y axis modulations. They're sealed Allen Bradley potentiometers. Really good potentiometers there. But anyways, that's pretty much a look at the Crumar Spirit as an instrument here. Just want to give you guys a good demo of it, a good overview of it. Appreciate you guys watching, and once again, a special thanks to Michelle Moog and you guys at the Bob Moog Foundation for giving me the opportunity to work on this thing for you. It's been a real treat and a real honor. But there'll be more here to come soon, guys. Thanks for watching. Take care. Well, I started editing the video and I realized I forgot one critical switch here in our modulation section I want to show you real quick. So what I've got a square wave set up on our modulation X, and it's modulating just the oscillator A only. I've got just oscillator A turned up in our mixer. And the switch I want to show you is actually this switch right here in our destination area. And it's called shape X with Y. So when it's off, what you're going to hear is just that square wave in our X modulation here. And when I engage the switch, you're going to hear actually a frequency shift with shaper Y. So you get something like this. So there's just modulation X. We'll flip the switch on. And you can actually hear it controls the amount of modulation with shaper Y when the switch is activated. We can change our waveforms. So anyways, that's what that switch there does. I just want to show you that real quick.